We're going to go deep dive into, really understanding the tactics on how you can pitch the restaurant buyers well, So my goal is to bring value to you, and I've sold wine myself, so I believe I have some good questions, but we want to make this as selfish as possible. So if you really have your own question, I would encourage you to ask, like literally, not the pitch in a nice way, but literally, you can say the pitch as well. It's just that they're going to say, yeah, and then, bye-bye. So try your best, but be selfish for your question. We will have 20 minutes, good Q&A. Please keep writing your questions. I'll go through about 40 minutes. The goal really is to help you pitch better, work with them better, and for them to increase the likability of your partnership, right? So first, I think I'm just going to have each of you please introduce about your role, what you do, and just walk over, how your role involves in your restaurant group.
Okay. Yeah, I am Cami Lehmann. I am from Brinker International. I'm on the Maggiano's Little Italy brand. I've only been on the brand for about a year and a half. Previous to that, I was on the Chili's Grill and Bar brand, which is obviously a lot larger than the Maggiano's brand. But I run all the marketing, so I do all of the digital marketing as well as all of the beverage and food programming, menu, and everything, marketing related within the restaurant.
Super.
My name is Katelyn Peil. I am a beverage director for Seattle-based Heavy Restaurant Group, and it's a locally owned restaurant group, but we have multiple locations that are individually run, and it is a multi-concept restaurant group, so everything is slightly different. My best example, I was talking to someone earlier today, is that markets can be so different even though they're so close together. Two of my concepts actually share a parking lot, and the programs couldn't be more different. So a lot of variety within the restaurant group.
Okay. Hello, I am Rachel Lowe. I am the Director of Beverage Operations now for Levy. I am the Director of Beverage for the restaurant group, and now have I'm straddling the sports and entertainment division as well, which is kind of a nationally established company where we oversee, again, a lot of stadiums and things. So we have concessions and we have restaurants, and we kind of straddle everything there. And I've been with the company 7.5 years at this point, moved up through that.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Let's walk over, you all have different kind of businesses, different business models. We want to go right into the buying process so people understand different kind of buying processes, right? So what is your buying process? And what I mean by that is, when are the openings? Is it like tenders, or are you open to new vendors? Is there a limit? What the exact thing? Like I'm allowed 2 vendors new. I can only work with Gallo or whatever it is. Give me an exact buying process for your own businesses, please.
Yeah, sure. So on the Brinker side, for the past probably 3 or 4 years that I've been on the beverage side, first at Chili's and then at Maggiano's, is that we have 2 RFP meetings really a year. So those are all with very current menued suppliers, and so they come in. They, we talk about our business review, but we also talk about opportunities. And that's really their time to, pitch to us at that point. We do welcome, new suppliers to the mix through some agency partners, but also just connections within the industry. If we feel like it would be a good fit, we will make the time to listen and hear out what the opportunity may be. We don't have a limit. It's really just based on the time that we have, and so it's not like we have a whole week that we set aside for new suppliers. It's just kind of as we work them into our schedule.
Got it. So it's mainly agencies and old suppliers first. Trying to develop your new needs.
Right.
Got it.
Right. Correct.
My experience is slightly different. Obviously, being a smaller, although relatively large restaurant group for our market, we don't have a national chain. So I'm working with independent retailers on average. Like I'm working with 20 to 25 distributors and suppliers on a weekly basis. Obviously, the past couple years have really shifted everything. So it has been a little more streamlined recently, but I will never close the door to anyone. I mean, there's an amazingly immense world of all beverages out there, so I want to make sure that I don't get tunnel vision and make sure that I'm still opening the door to new suppliers. Where we are based, we are in the heart of the east side availability of the Washington wine community. So most all of the wineries and all the fruit are grown over on the other side of the mountains, but this huge development of a hub of tasting rooms and smaller wineries have developed in the Woodinville area, so the proximity is really nice. So I'm working directly with wineries. I have a lot of relationships that I've built through there. Even if they have a distributor, oftentimes I have those direct relationships with them. Back in the early days, I used to have, one weekly tasting day where it was just kind of a cattle call. I don't think that that's the best way for my time or your time as well. I want to be really respectful of everyone's time. I want to be efficient with my tasting project. So I do tend to set up appointments specifically now. Please do not drop by with no appointment. I mean, it is totally fine to drop in, leave your information. We're operating at a similar capacity, but with a quarter of the staff currently, and it's definitely changed our buying structure and our operations. And there's a lot of opportunity still there. But so definitely make sure that you have some time set aside. But I try to be as efficient as possible. And over the years, I've built my own little Excel system for my tasting grid, and everything is filterable. And so just because I don't have an opportunity for you in that moment doesn't mean that I don't want to experience those. So I will always taste everything, given that it is going to fit the program. But just because it's not readily available, I don't have a hole for it currently. Sometimes months later, sometimes even a year later, I can go back through all my tasting notes and reach out to someone and say, hey, what is the current vintage of this? Do you still have supply of this? Since COVID, I'm making changes way faster than I used to. We went from a program of having 80 wines by the glass and 500 bottles to about 30 wines by the glass. And I have about 40 to 50 bottles printed at one time. Because although we are using the QR code, we have kind of transitioned to one little sheet so we can still have a printed option for somebody. So it's allowing me to go through a lot more inventory. So even the smaller scale opportunities are completely readily available. Sometimes, I can be like, ooh, I want to buy 3 bottles of this cool obscure wine that you're selling because I know that I can sell that because it's a more streamlined, smaller program. But it has changed a little bit about how we're doing buying, but I'm still open to every distributor. I know that there's a vast beverage world out there, and I don't want to make sure that I get that tunnel vision.
Got it.
Yeah, so I would agree, seeing that I'm straddling two kind of completely different worlds. In the restaurant division, I mean, I'm very much with you, Katelyn, that please don't just drop in. That is thoroughly, I'll hide. The God. Sounds mean, but just make an appointment. And if you make an appointment, I am happy to taste anything with you and give anybody, an option or the opportunity to present something to me. I'm totally open to everything, and especially, in the restaurant division, I have a lot more flexibility in terms of each individual placement, each location has its own personality, and that's part of the beauty of all of that is that we get to hand select all of these wines, and so I think relationships are enormous when it comes to that. And I think that from both sides, from the buyer and from those who are selling us the wines, it needs to be a positive relationship. So starting off on the right foot and just bringing the right things to the table is ideal. And then when it comes to the S&E side, for me, I mean, RFPs are enormous. I mean, it's a more of a seasonal change for that. Opportunities are certainly available, but it's a matter of what and where. Again, in the stadiums, everything is individual as far as that all works by ownership. So we can certainly talk and embrace opportunities in each location nationally, but again, that's less of a conversation about a specific placement in one location.
Super. So, you've all said appointments, getting an appointment. Yeah, we all want to get appointment. What's a good way for folks to approach you that they have a high chance of getting an appointment? What would that email title look like? What would that body, what would that approach look like? If you were to tell your friend, that this is how you, behind the scene, do it, how would you explain that?
I mean, I think...
in all seriousness, I mean, this is a perfect approach, and you will love this,
I think my perfect approach is, as Rachel said, relationships are super important.
So, lunch, dinner, coffee first?
Well, and just having connections with the industry, it's great if it's a new supplier, but somebody I know, like Katelyn, knows them, and they know that they're an amazing, supplier for her. Having a mutual connection.
I'm just going to do back and forth here. So, they try that approach, saying, "Can you refer me for an appointment?"
Regards that I will have for a new appointment is a referral.
Okay.
And so it's approaching me and saying, "Hey, I know somebody that you work with or that you know, and I think we have some great opportunities specifically for Maggiano's." One of the things that I don't like is getting an email that's a very blanket email, and you can tell that they just popped in Maggiano's and they popped in my name. There's nothing specific to my concept. There's nothing that would maybe make sense. And so just not, sending me those because I'm going to not respond.
How can suppliers research about, get educated about your own businesses in crafting that pitch better in the post?
Visit our restaurants. So that's the number one thing I would say is go into our restaurant. If you haven't been to Maggiano's and then you come and try to talk to me about our wine program, I'm going to know pretty immediately that you have not been in our restaurant. So.
Got it. And you said a few things about your model agency and RFPs. Where can people find about where does this RFP?
So we currently work with a third party, IMI, but there's a ton of those out there. But also our distributor partners are a big piece of that. So
what question do the suppliers ask? Is there RFP open for your group?
Yeah, I would say that they can ask that, and they can also say, what's the chance that I can, maybe have an appointment with them, and that our agency partner will come to me and they say, there's somebody reaching out. I think it would be a good fit, so they kind of vet that for me a little bit too. So that's kind of how I would think the perfect process would be for me.
Cool. We'll use the referral approach. How about you?
I think that this is going to be remotely similar across the board. But without using RFPs and things like that, obviously, and Rachel touched on this in her presentation as well, but it's really important to be prepared. Know your customer. So we don't want to waste your time. We don't want to waste my time. I know everyone is trying to ultimately make a sale, but if it's not going to work for, said concept, don't worry about it. As for kind of the blanket email template, they're more recognizable than I think people tend to realize, because I know I get tons of them. One extra special tidbit is make sure that you're spelling the person's name correctly. It is literally my email address. You have to type it correctly to send the email. And I know mistakes are made all the time, but it's easy to own those. And if you just don't even notice that one detail that you literally had to type it one way and then you're choosing to type it another way, that already shows me that you're just not taking that little extra moment to actually be thoughtful about that pitch.
I think, was that meant for me?
No.
Because I accidentally sent a wrong email.
Well, you just sent it to the wrong person.
Sorry.
And also be careful with that. It was fine, but I can see it. Oftentimes I'll be like, I think this was for a different K in your
It's that automation thing, man. Too much automation is going on. But
yeah,
back to
it happens all the time. But that is one extra little tidbit. Just make sure that you're actually catering it to your customer. Visiting the restaurants, the concepts is the best way to get to know what are we doing.
But can people just visit? Sorry to interrupt. Just like say, I'm here to do a research before I pitch your buyer.
They love it.
Absolutely. And we also, I'm going to speak for myself here. I put all of our things online as well. You can access all of our menus, especially now with things are shifting to so much online QR codes. It's pretty easy to find the template. And oftentimes, especially in the current climate, I don't have as much time as I would like to be extra creative and to really dig into the program and find those holes. There's always going to be a hole. It's your job as suppliers to kind of look at that program and say, what out of my portfolio or what can I pitch to you that's going to fit this program and why?
But Katelyn, how will they know the holes, by just looking at the menu? Where would they ask? Who would they?
Well, I think that comes with being a good supplier and knowing your own portfolio. And if you look at my wine list and you're like, okay, great, you have these 3 Cabernets, for example, but you're missing this one region. I have one, great. I'm going to use that as a pitching market.
Yep.
Or I see that you're missing, a Chenin Blanc or whatever it may be. Do you have interest in that? Is there a reason why that's not currently on your menu? Because it could just be seasonal. It could just because I had this available and it was the right time. Oftentimes these things are perfect opportunities. If I taste with a supplier and they're pitching something that maybe I was like, oh, I didn't know that I needed that. And then with current supply chain issues, there's more opportunity than ever to kind of slide into holes. Supply chain issue is real, and I know that. So obviously, I don't want to see gaps in supply, but I know that it's a reality, and it happens all the time. But making sure that you're looking at the program and saying what are you offering that can help add to that program, and using the resources that are available to you. Most menus you can find online. Mm-hmm. Also, you can look up a lot about what do they cater to. If you know that they're catering to sports and entertainment venues, you're probably not going to pitch them some exclusive first growth situation that they can get 6 bottles of. Knowing that there's different avenues within that will also help your sales pitch. For us, we're a restaurant group, but over the past 2 years, we're quickly pivoting and navigating new things. We've shifted to now an online system, and we have a little home goods element to our restaurant group, and we're doing prepackaged dinners and meals and experiences and home goods, and we've built out actually a smaller retail section in some of our restaurant concepts. And so just because it doesn't necessarily fit the restaurant, maybe for a glass pour program, then I also have that retail option. And so just knowing that about any customer that you're going to walk into is going to help you be able to make that sales pitch and to hit them in the right moment.
Cool. We'll come back to that question, but I just had a follow-up, which can be for all 3 of you. One is, I believe that one common theme for big buyers is if suppliers can be solution providers, like good data, research, give them a solution to a problem which they are also trying to solve. What are some good solution pitches that you've seen from some suppliers that actually helped you in the business?
Do you want to take that?
I could try to say, I guess most recent experience is the lack thereof, if that's horrible for me to come from that way, but I am building out or supporting the writing of a location in LA, which has it's a broad location with sub-locations, right? And each location has its identity. everyone seems like they're drowning, so I'm kind of coming in last minute and trying to support on the development of the beverage programming. So that leads me to like try and like research like, you know, vendors, contact information, portfolios and all of that, which is fine. Like that's kind of part of what I find enjoyable about the creative aspect of what we do. But that said, our local companies to provide proposals, right, for writing the entire wine program for one of these locations, which I find lazy, to say the least.
Yeah.
So not only do I find that offensive, but then
It saves you time, basically. Someone saved you time, right? So.
Right, it's like that's, so not only, right, so these two companies, who will remain unnamed, proposed these very, like just
pedestrian wine lists.
Yeah, thank you. That like that label things that are just like stacked everywhere that have so much exposure that clearly, if it's not that, they're targeting placements for their own benefit, and it really had nothing to do with our vision, with the concept of the restaurant, like nothing. So I ended up having to like write from scratch and try and introduce small importers and distributors as well to layer the beverage program to make it more complex and in any way interesting for our hopefully, you know, soon to be guests. So I thought, you know, that was a fail, right? So not to say I'm talking about the negative,
yeah. No,
but
what not to do, yeah.
Yeah, what not to do, I think, is a huge part.
They could have given you a nice non-selfish homework, and then you would have liked them.
Yeah, for sure, exactly.
Cool.
So.
And back to the buying pitch, right?
Yeah.
What's a good approach to you? You know.
So similar to what
referrals.
Yeah, I mean it's just like no generic emails. Like you have to make it specific to me and my programming. Just be like, I have a thoughtful proposal for you. Like these are things I'm thinking about. Maybe even be like, let me know your thoughts, right? And maybe I'll come back and be like, no. But if you know, I knowing you have this in your portfolio, just give me some insight, like or ability to control it a little bit, unless you feel confident that you're coming at me with like the strongest proposal, and then fine, that works too. But be sure that that's, be like honest and legit. Like that's really what I ask for.
What are the strict no's? You know, like for example, I was just having a chat with Jeff from Bevmo. Like he had an example saying, if you're selling Total Wine, this program, I'm out. You know, so what are the strict no's? Like, okay, if you do this, it's a no. If next door restaurants are having, it's a no. What are the no's?
I mean, you pretty much just nailed it.
That's just one example.
I think you answered your own question.
I think maybe there must be more. So it's one. Let's say you can't sell to neighboring restaurants or your competitors.
Be honest that I have placed this over here.
Okay.
Like, right? Because a lot of people have been like, oh, yeah, I have this new placement. And then you go down and have lunch with somebody and you see it and you're like, I really appreciate it when somebody's like, to be honest, I have this placed by the glass here and here, which is somewhat close to you. Transparency is huge.
Yeah.
Which on the national side, there's not too much of that. Obviously, our wines are in lots of national chains.
Exactly, like
so,
you know, I would be selling in Olive Garden, and then I would want to come in your list as well. How do you approach that?
It's not a negative to me because there is so much crossover in our guests, and it's like, okay, well, they have it on their wine list. That may mean that they move a lot of it, and that their guests are asking for it. So our guests may be, you know, more inclined to purchase it as well. So I don't have as much of a, you know, if they ever do
if
that.
If there's a customer, you take it, basically, right? If your customers are asking you.
Right,
exactly. And I don't mind, like, the extra exposure, but it's just about knowing about it. I mean, it's our jobs to make sure that we have that complete picture of brand recognizable products that people are familiar with and that we know that people will buy. You know, some names that are usually found on higher end wine lists, etc. But then also finding cool, new, unique stuff. People kind of come to smaller restaurants to try to find out those newer things. And so some retail presence is definitely not a negative to me. I don't mind that, but it is just being aware of where that is placed, so I can kind of take in my own market research on what does the pricing structure look like. I'm in this weird balance of retail versus on-premise sales structures and trying to find that happy medium. I mean, we've shifted to online, our own online platform, in addition to now navigating third parties. And with ever-changing drink regulations and laws, we're now able to sell that stuff through third parties. So I'm trying to have all these different pricing structures, and it doesn't make sense for me to be selling a wine to somebody that they can literally get next door for significantly cheaper, which is a specific problem that I see for my restaurant group, because literally in our parking lot, this is the 20th year that we opened the first location for our restaurant group in Woodinville, Washington. And within that now, there are 100 wineries within a 5-mile radius from our restaurant. And in our parking lot alone, there are 15 tasting rooms. So for me, I want to support our neighbors. I want to support our market, but it doesn't make sense for me to compete with your retail pricing if you're offering that same bottle right next door. So what is more successful for me as a pitch is something that maybe is a secondary label that you don't sell in your tasting room, or something that doesn't have as much brand recognition, so I can control the cost and margin for that rather than you dictating that. When we first started, we want people to enjoy good food and good wine. We had 0 corkage fee policy, and pretty quickly I was like, as the wine industry started enveloping us, I was like, we have to change this. People find that out and they'll literally just go next door, buy the bottle of wine for their wine club pricing and bring it right back into the restaurant. So just trying to find that balance, but being creative with other opportunities. So do the research on that market and that operation within that market.
Cool. Rachel, we want to go on the control label and private label side of things. Why do you want to make that, and what makes you decide to go and make this control label or a private label brand? Walk us through just your thoughts on why you guys go for it.
Yeah, so a lot, you kind of summarized from the earlier talk. A private label is a really great opportunity to partner with somebody who is providing us with something that's of great quality that we feel confident will represent us as a restaurant group or a group in general, that offers us a lower margin than perhaps our other placements, or lower bottom line, right, than our other placements, and that has no exposure, so that we may better, increase our margin, and nobody will know, to be honest.
Correct, yeah.
But
main reason is profit margin.
I think main
100%.
reason is profit.
Margins.
So you normally is that you normally pick your top selling SKUs and then let's try private label in this now because it's the horse. I mean, we want to have increase the margin, duplicate that SKU.
Right. So if you could, for one of my restaurants, we were looking at doing a private label because we would do this. That would be our house, red and white. It would be available for all of our private events, which weddings and things were the money maker at that location. But also our house pour, but it was a recognizable varietal and addition. So it was something about Cabernet. So it would probably clearly be our fastest moving glass pours in addition to our house wine. Right. So we're instantly making
it's
much more.
There's this premium package, you get this brand, and then there's a little silver package where this wine is save you a lot of money.
It's great, and it tastes good too.
Yeah.
That's important. It has to look and taste good.
With private label products, you have the ability to, to determine that narrative. You have the quality control and also the cost control if you are involved with that process.
Exactly.
And obviously margin is the number one driving factor for that.
Yeah.
But exactly.
And what other things, maybe Cami, you can add other things that you would want in that supplier? Can you hold my inventory? Can you hold the price? Can you, what are other things you're asking?
Obviously price is super important. Inventory would be the number one thing for us, because we have had a couple of different private labels that have just not been able to keep up with our inventory. So just making sure that forecasting is correct, obviously working with our teams to ensure that no one could have predicted the pandemic. So of course there was a lot of wine sitting in the distributors for quite a while, but helping us to resolve as we, opened up, how do we move through that wine? Like just being a good partner overall, just to make it a success for the restaurant, but also for the suppliers, most important.
That's a good point. So just quickly say, because at one of our music venues, it's a big 5-month thing. We had committed a Sauvignon Blanc to basically all the locations, and all of a sudden there was an outage, and we were like, well, what can you do for us? Because we committed to you, and they were like, and I was just like, oh, well, we're going to be really excited to keep working with you. Whereas another company who experienced the same thing offered us a little bit more expensive product for the discounted price to equal that or, meet that price.
Yeah, I wanted to ask that, in this past 18 months, especially, you have seen a lot, and the guys who showed up, you're going to support them now. You know who was standing with you. Walk us through some scenarios and examples of case studies of a good partnership that happened in 18 months. One example was that, but some more so we can learn that this is how you can support as well.
Yeah, my case study is very real and very recent, and I won't name the companies, but we have our house red and white private label, and again, distribution was an issue for a while, and we had another supplier step in and said, hey, we can provide you with the product that you're looking for. You can keep your label. We can transition this. And we can make this a better experience for you. And so we moved forward with that partner, and then the pandemic hit. And so we had all of this old inventory of wine with one supplier, and then they had already started creating new inventory for the new supplier. So we worked through that it was kind of as I was coming on board, this was all happening. And so it was one of my first projects. It was not the most fun project to work on, but the one that holds the private label today, they helped me move inventory of the old product. Because obviously...
Bought back some stock? Is that what
so they worked with the distributor partners to, buy back some stuff, and obviously we blessed, if there was another restaurant company that was not a competitor, they could take that wine in. There was just a lot of creative solves that they put forth that, they didn't have to do that. Yeah. They could have said, you signed the contract, the pandemic happened, that's not something that's, in our control. So that was just an amazing strategic partnership that they brought forth, and that's why, we're going to continue with that.
Fantastic. How about you, Lowe? Any story?
Mine's just on a smaller scale. Just obviously in the past 18 months, just lots of gaps in supply, which I get it. I'm actually a really nice buyer. I'm flexible, and as I can work with you, then I will absolutely do my best to try to accommodate that as well. But trying to get ahead of it, I think, is the number one thing. I know that it was very hard to predict everything, but if you see your depletion rates happening at a much faster thing, people are panic buying beverages right now the same way that they did toilet paper and all the same things. Wine sales has been crazy, which is great, but, especially very big struggle with imported wines, all the supply chain issues, container issues, the lack of staff at all the ports and entries. We have containers that are just sitting outside of Seattle that everyone's like, oh, well, that glass pour I sold you has been sitting out there for 5 weeks, and I don't know when it will be released. And that is infuriating for everyone. I get that. And so right now, there are a lot of opportunities. If you have supply of something, you can easily kind of swoop in there and say, hey, here's your Band-Aid for this, and try to build that partnership. That's a much bigger scale than, here's, 3 cases of Cremant to get you through to whatever.
This weekend,
But, just trying to get ahead of it in transparency. If I just don't hear from you and I don't get a shipment and I'm outed on something and there's no communication, it's very hard for me. And sometimes that information doesn't even get to me as quickly as it could. And so just try to be transparent. I mean, building partnerships is important, and we need to be able to rely on each other, and reliability equals that loyalty, and that's just the important foundation to build that partnership.
Got it. Rachel, any good examples?
Yeah, I mean, in addition to the one I mentioned earlier, I mean, it's the same thing, like exactly, like transparency, just please communicate with me. We all understand that there is a lack of, like, there are issues going on in supply chain, and that's fine, but exactly what you said is, like, don't disappear, just, like, communicate with me, talk to me. I'm a patient and nice buyer, like, I pride myself in being, I like to work well with everyone. So reciprocate that and communicate that to me, and then like if you can come through with, like, an option to just fill that placement for a little bit, you can probably maintain that placement when that shipment comes in. Otherwise, you very well could lose it to somebody who is more flexible or more supportive of your program, or more there for you in general.
Got it.
And I think, just really quickly, and I think that's also important for you guys as suppliers to communicate what that also looks like to you. A lot of on-premise buyers don't really understand the supplier and sales side. So if you, like, you know, it's not easy to fill those Band-Aids. It's not easy to offer a quick replacement, especially if something so large scale. Even if you're like, you have to negotiate with whomever it may be, and you're going to have to take a little cut on that price, be transparent about that. I want to be able to work with you guys on that. If I have the option to know about that, then I can try to meet you in the middle and maybe pay a slightly higher price for that product, but then be able to adjust for that on my front end side, so I can kind of pass that on to our consumer, so we're all pivoting and working together, because it shouldn't just be up to you to eat all of that as well, but be transparent.
Super. Let's say we got our meetings, you know, I'm finally sitting with you in your room, and I have this presentation and I have this opportunity, right, for my control label, private label pitch. What kind of questions you would ask me so I can help them prepare better, and what would you really want to see in the pitch, apart from price and quality? You know, what other deck materials you would want to see and you would want to ask me?
I would want to see timelines.
Delivery times, you mean?
Yeah, or just
the project?
kind of all encompassing. And I would also want to see, you know, my involvement, you know, what they see my involvement being.
Who's doing what, like,
right,
in the development?
Right. I think obviously price.
What about marketing? Do you ask them, how are you going to help me resell?
Yeah, I think marketing obviously is very important. Specifically, you know, what you call the wine, how you package it, everything to the, you know, details, and their experiences. What have they seen work in the on-premise, specifically for restaurant chains like mine? Like, bringing that sort of data is always going to be very, you know, in high regard with a sales pitch.
What sort of marketing support do you usually ask? You know, like in the first 3 months, let's say, educational tastings, winemaker tastings, or whatever. You know, billboard saying that it's now available in your or newspaper or digital. Let's talk real. Like, you know, what's a yes to you? I mean, what can they do to get a yes?
Probably more so on the staff training piece. Okay. I would say that, you know, providing the materials to our staff that gets them excited to sell the wine label. They have to be in the restaurant to be purchasing it. And so if our staff is engaged with the program, you know, how does the supplier support that? Well, are they doing tastings with our staff? Are they out there in the market? Are they providing us with materials that are very quick to learn for, you know, all of our new staff that we have in the restaurants today? And so that's more important to me than the actual marketing piece. We kind of handled that on our own in terms of the guest facing.
Cool. How about you?
I mean, Cami pretty much summed it up, I think, in that. We don't often use a lot of partnership in marketing stuff because we do like to kind of create our own narrative and make sure that we're really staying on brand. But definitely,
do you boil it down to like a bill back dollar? Let's say you do everything, but hey, I'm going to bill you.
You can. Everything is slightly different.
I'm trying to get to them making that deck which has the best 3 marketing programs, be it like $5,000 budget, even if it's a number. But what is that meat which is great for you for helping you resell?
I mean, I know this probably isn't what you want to hear, but like I don't really actually need a deck. Like I just need the cost and the quality to be in line.
Okay.
And then because we can get behind that as a brand. And obviously the marketing component for me is really helping with that level of involvement and the staff education to that. Like we also control our staff education as well, but any documents or anything that can help me, or even if you come in and do something for the staff, but really they're the ones that are the grassroots efforts of selling that wine. Mm-hmm. So it's important for that. Like I don't necessarily need a billboard, but then everyone we can talk about it.
It doesn't hurt.
Yeah, we can talk about it.
Yeah, but then everyone can give you price and quality and staff training. That's what my point was. What else, right? But I get your point.
Yeah.
How about you, Rachel?
Agreed. No billboards. I mean, this is a private label for us, and I don't we're in charge of promoting this.
But won't it help if I just say I'll get you foot traffic this Friday?
Yes.
This $50 ad.
Yes, I think that really kind of comes into play with getting to know your customer and what is going to work for that environment. Like we're in the middle of, literally 15 tasting rooms. Can we do some sort of fun pop-up patio event where you come and supply and have some sort of interactive tasting event with our consumers that is more just kind of catching walk-by traffic? It really just is going to have to become a partnership and developing those new tactics for marketing. It's not quite as easy as a billboard.
But alternatively, you might not want the face or somebody behind your private label.
For sure.
So say if I'm doing something for my stadiums, I want to be in charge of education. That's something that we're trying to promote, and that's part of my role moving into S&E as well, is to get the DOs to start to feel confident and love what they're selling, so that can trickle down to everyone within that environment. Whereas in the restaurant group, it can be much more personalized and sure, we can get samples and talk about that, but at the same time, it's very much compartmentalized and very specific as to how you broach marketing and how the support goes.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Sometimes
I think I want to
look behind the curtain.
open up to them as well, but if as we get some questions, we can keep asking, because I just want to have enough time for direct business case questions. Guys, so feel free to please raise your hand. We have Megan out there who will run around with the mic, and then over here, Megan, and then after there. So please, as I said, be selfish as you can. It's okay. I'm sure they all have the same questions. Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
I have a question about esoteric grape varietals. Are they on the rise at all, or are you still working with mainstream grape varietals in your restaurants? I mean, I'm pretty sure you're on the mainstream grape varietals for concert halls or stadiums or whatnot, and probably with you as well. But do you see a rise in esoteric grape varietals?
I can start with this one because we're definitely kind of a more smaller curated program. But we do, even though we're in the heart of the Washington wine community, we do really want to highlight wine from all around the world, including all types of varietals. I do think that people tend to come to wine bars to learn about something new. I will always have something, more unique, more esoteric, which is a very subjective thing. Some people think some mainstream varietals are a little bit more esoteric, and that's completely fine. But I do think that, some of the younger beverage consumers, the new generation of beverage consumers, are more interested in experimenting with things that they're not really as familiar with. We live in the era of Instagram and influencing, and some people could see some cool region, and then they come in and they ask, do you have any wine from this area? Because a lot of people, not even familiar that there is wine grown in these areas. And, when I start trying to talk to people about what types of attributes do you like in wines, I try to bring them something that they would not be familiar with. obviously we will always carry, the mainstream varietals. But when you look at product mix, it's been really fun over the past few years that there has been a larger percentage of the product mix with more obscure wines, more other styles of varietals. Something that is successful for me at the restaurant group is incorporating them into wine flights. And so it's just a little tasting flight. They're usually organized by theme or region, something maybe I'm excited about, or like try all three of these Portuguese wines together, and it could be a rosé, a sparkling, and a red. And some people are like, oh, I thought this was going to be all three dessert wines. I was like, there's more to Portugal. So that has been a really successful tool that I've personally used, getting wines in front of people. I know that something like, one of my best wine flights is called the Teeth Stainer, just, full, robust wines, but that's not specified by a varietal. So I'll always kind of sneak something cool in there, maybe throw in, a dense Zweigelt or something that, people are like, oh, didn't even know what this was. So I definitely think that it's on the rise.
I think it's definitely depends on the application. So like in a higher environment, you can do pairings and kind of force your guest to think outside of the box just because they chose to do the pairings. And in that sense, it's like, you're going to try this. Or hand selling like, oh, I like Pinot Noir. Here's an Etna, Rosso, whatever. But I also think when it comes down to it, if it's like a bigger scale restaurant or whatever it is, education is huge. So if you're going to present a lesser known varietal, or you could do it as a red blend or a white blend, and then the more people were into it, the more your staff would be like, well, it's actually these varietals or whatever, engagement from all sides is really important to gain leverage, I think.
I think just maybe to clarify, is there a demand consumers are asking, or it's still a hand sell thing?
Or a hand sell still, okay. I think.
But I do think that it's trending more towards that. I think the pandemic obviously heightened people to drink familiar brands because that's what they could obtain, and they knew what they were getting, right? So they weren't as adventurous when they were at home. As they're returning to restaurants, I do think we have seen a shift in what they're purchasing, specifically on food in terms of premiumization. But even on our cocktail list and our wine list, they are being more adventurous because they weren't getting that at home. They were they were nervous to get something, a whole bottle of something, and then not like it. Whereas, at a restaurant, you can get a glass of it, and even if you don't like it, you can, send it back at that point. And you can't do that at home. Like, you can't take it back to the grocery store and it'd be corked. So,
true. Other questions? I think.
I have a question for, you talked about staff education and training. Day of, so looking outside of incentives or anything like that, what do you find to be really effective or creative with your staff outside of just speaking to them about the wines? What can a supplier do to really get them engaged with the wines?
That's a good question.
Great question.
Yeah, because incentives don't always work, frankly. I've tried them, and I feel a little weird doing that in the first place. Honestly, I think if it's like, okay, there's a winemaker in town, bring the winemaker. I mean, that's always, in any way that you can engage your staff at a deeper level, I think that's always cool. So whenever we had a winemaker in town that we were pouring by the glass, they would come and talk to our staff and taste through everything and learn the story, because I can say maybe even the same things that the winemaker would or similar things, but it's not to the same effect. So I think that's huge. So, a connection, a deeper connection thread to the winemaker, the winery. I think that's huge. Again, incentives, I don't know, for me, works for some people, but never really worked for me. I don't know. What about for you guys?
I think ultimately you are, make sure that you're selling the story of the wine, because there are a lot of amazing wines in the world. But when the staff gets to make that connection with the wine. Some other tidbit, like they don't really want to know the pH level. No. But making sure that there's some sort of connection to that wine and taking out the seriousness of it, I think is more effective with the staff. And I don't know about you guys, but our staff is getting younger and less experienced, especially our turnover with COVID has been, definitely driven that way. And the education component is more important than ever. And so making sure that we have the bandwidth to be able to do that, but making it just a little bit more personal and selling like the story of the wine and why that they would enjoy sharing that with not only their guests, but good wine is meant to be shared with good food, good friends, and being able to sell that makes it easy for the staff to be able to sell that and have them taste it. If they are legally allowed to taste that wine, get it in their mouth, because that is going to be the best way for them to experience that. And I think that if the supplier can take an extra step in knowing what that operation does and say this glass of Albarino would pair really well with this chicken pasta on our menu. Being able to correlate that, giving them one tidbit that they can take tableside is going to give them and build that confidence in them to be able to start suggesting that.
That's exactly what I was going to say, is every single time that we roll out a new wine, we will say it pairs well with, these 2 or 3 menu items so that they know when they're talking to a table, what are you interested in eating tonight? Because I have, good wine pairings for all of our dishes. And that gives them, like you said, confidence that they can sell the wine even though they may not know every single little detail about it.
And one thing to tie into the esoteric grape varietals, if it's something that people aren't as familiar with and the staff might not have experienced or tried, have an easy sidestep to kind of be able to compare that to. I know that obscure varietal is not trying to be that mainstream varietal, but saying your guests that are going to a mid-tier, very well-balanced Chardonnay, it's going to be an easy sidestep to have this kind of fresh expression of this version of Viognier. So being able to kind of give them a correlation that makes it a little easier for them to just be a little less intimidating with it.
Thank you.
I think what you want is really what your SOMs can talk to the consumers in training, right? In simple words.
Yeah, but our SOM teams have been disbanded. We have less bandwidth on the floor, so it is really important that the staff is equally as well versed in what we're doing. We take pride for our restaurant group to make sure that our staff is very knowledgeable. We have required weekly staff education classes where we are going over what we are doing with the staff. I don't care that they don't know every single appellation of France. They need to know what we do and why we do it and why it's on the menu.
Nice. Questions?
So obviously the entire industry is seeing supply issues right now. And as a producer, one of the biggest issues we're seeing is glass supply and glass prices. What is the restaurant industry? What was the biggest challenge in looking at that? And is there opportunities for alternative packaging like single-use kegs, 3-liter boxes, and cans?
Great.
I'm not personally opposed to any of them. And we have used different styles of alternative packaging. I have done wine on tap. I have poured wine out of a box. And I don't mind admitting that because the quality was there. But that being said,
Are you prioritizing that right now? If some supplier offered you that or other things?
It has to fit depending on other metrics as well. But I had to shift. I actually moved all of my wine off of tap, and I actually converted all of my tap handles to cocktails on tap because it's just for use of ease for the staff. It's cocktail consistency when losing a bar team and all the scratch things. It's easier and it's more consistent. I do think that alternative packaging. I will try anything, but it does have to be well received by the consumer as well. But I have more opportunity to do that with our retail, and I think now there's more opportunity with that with third-party applications as well. So there's little individual bottles that I've been able to purchase that I can offer specifically on a third-party app. It's changed our buying for splits and alternative packaging and all the things. So I definitely think that there's a big market there for it. I have yet to pour tableside from the 3-liter box, but I'm not too proud to try it,
What about you, Cami? I think because you have freight, I imagine, would be important part because of the big planning.
Yeah, for us, we just look at this as a temporary thing. So we don't want to make any
changing
rash decision. Not that your decisions are rash, but it's just like there's.
Oh, they change every day.
But we don't want to change something that we're going to regret later when things kind of normalize. We see it on the food side as well. When you think about one of the dishes we have is lobster carbonara, and we're paying 50% food cost on our dish right now with lobster. But it's one of our most famous, and our guests love it. And so to take it off the menu, it was a huge debate. And so it's the same for us in terms of the suppliers that we work with on the wine side. If you're not able to kind of provide what we're needing right now, we can make some changes, but know that things will get better.
I think everyone's holding the cost and eating up, but sooner or later it's going to come, and some things.
Yeah, we're increasing our costs our prices across the board in beverage right now, just because of the situation that we're in. It's minimal.
I think as beverage, it's kind of falling to us a little bit more to try to help counteract all of the food price increases and things like that. I know for me, I'm looking at it all the time, and I'm making a little more flexibility for margin.
Let's twist that question one more before the audience is, where are the opportunities? What are you looking at these days? What would be a good product that you're looking for next 12 months?
Product that has supply.
Supply, the ability to have a high margin. We cannot talk about margin anymore.
Yeah.
So what is high margin defined? We sell, they sell to you $6 and you sell at $20? What percentage is high margin?
I don't have a standardized system for us, because it's really about the big picture, right? It's about looking at the program as a whole. But that's where you really have to start monitoring your sales and your product mix to make sure that your most profitable items are the ones that are being sold the most. So I'm constantly making changes. I'm constantly looking for new opportunities. I know it's a slightly smaller scale than, I would need something with a lot of consistency if I was putting it in stadiums, So there isn't really one specific structure, but, there is obviously some standardized ideas where people are trying to kind of recoup that first glass pour sale by recouping that bottle price. So that's kind of a good baseline to start.
Got it. Cool. Questions?
Is there anyone else?
I would also say, just to the, what are we trying to fill? I would say it's a lot easier, and I know we talked about this, but to fill a gap versus to be a replacement.
Yep.
So because, again, I'm very loyal to the current suppliers that I have, and, there may be some opportunities with them individually, but if you can look at my, wine program or features program and say, I have a perfect fit for you that you don't have on your list today. I have a Cabernet that's priced at this, and you have a big gap between these two price points. I'm
sure you would buy champagne pellets if someone sold it right now.
Right.
It's out of
any bubbly.
Yes. Yeah, actually, champagne's great. If you have that, I'll buy it.
Yeah.
And even Prosecco with a huge outage all over Chicago. Nobody had Prosecco.
All sparkling wine.
Yeah.
I was is this just a really exciting new fun trend that people are just now discovering them? But
saturated
all
categories,
that
dried
has
up.
been one of the things.
It's scary. Sometimes because you're going to start hand selling some other things to them, and then the category is going to take a while to come back.
But there is some big opportunity for ready to drink stuff, with now ever changing liquor laws. The ability for us to sell wine and cocktails to go has been a huge ability for us to help make more revenue. So ready to drink stuff, we're right around the corner from a concert venue, and so where you can actually picnic, and we're next to a park, so we're trying to be thoughtful about packaging. That comes into I want to make sure that it's a stealth enclosure, or I'm upselling them with a wine key to be able to open that bottle. So little thoughtful things like that, but there is a lot of room.
We'll take one last question, guys, and then off to John.
Katelyn, thanks for bringing up the whole cocktail conversation. It's clear that the macro trends of cocktails versus wine and beer. That's not going away. So how are you approaching, especially with margin being such a big deal, the margin that cocktails can give for you? How are you approaching private label, spirits, RTDs, and how can companies who can deliver on those, how can they best approach you and show you sort of options?
I mean, us currently, we've worked out with some of our local distributors that we're not necessarily using private label stuff for our well, but if we will commit, we try to use our buying power like anyone else. So if we're using the same well product at all of our locations, even though we have multiple bar managers or, completely different demographics, we want to make sure that it will still fit for those. But if we commit to, we can maybe commit to like a vodka private label and be able to use that, and then maybe not so like for our agave spirit, or vice versa, depending on where the margin is. So there is definitely the ability with private label products for the right program. But again, knowing those timelines and the supply and what that looks like is really important, because I don't want to put this into 10 restaurants and then not have that well vodka, because then I'll be in a pickle. We've been going through a lot more supply because we've moved almost everything to batching. So I am now batching cocktails into pony kegs, and I have that running through our tap system. So I'm using a lot more rather than, just supplying off that like few bottles to get me through. As for ready to drink stuff, good quality. Margins are a little harder to hit with cocktails and spirits, but that's just part of the big picture. So we have to kind of, as beverage people, we have to kind of counteract that with some other options. But the opportunity is definitely there. I don't know if you guys have any insight.
Rachel, Cami, closing remarks?
I would just say on the ready to drink, we've been exploring that for even pre-COVID, specifically at Chili's, because they are known for their margaritas, and we explored, lots of different margaritas ready to drink, but what I wanted was something that was specific to Chili's. So it's, the same product that they get inside the restaurant that they can now take home. And to go and delivery are a big focus for our concepts, especially after COVID. Just having something that is more private label or something that's made specifically for our concepts is what we're looking for. We're not looking for something that they can get off the shelf or that they can get, down the street at another restaurant.
Or that they know they can get.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's just similar, say locally, Ravinia, I don't know if you're familiar, but it's a summer music venue, outdoor music venue in Chicago or greater Chicago area. And we have these beverage carts where we'd offer some canned wine, some glass pour wines, etc. But we did start offering RTD. We partnered with Craft House, which is Charles Jolie, and that's probably all of you are familiar with this project. And I can't say that it's like the most, specific to us and our location, but I do believe in the product. I mean, I've tasted it, and I think it's actually holds up well. Whereas I think a lot of RTD cocktails don't show well. It's hard to pretend like there's natural acid, right, like citrus and things like that, to make it actually taste like a real margarita or mezcal margarita or whatever you're trying to represent. So we kind of, in that case, went with what we thought tasted the best, rather than being like, private label. But that's not to say if something was presented to us of that quality that we wouldn't consider it and do it in the broader market and broader markets generally.
Yeah, I mean, people are coming out with some really great new products and better quality, but with better quality oftentimes comes better price. And so if it's somebody else's brand, I'm willing to pay the extra premium to make sure that I'm going to stand behind that product. And if it's a private label product, I'm relying on the fact that my customer is trusting us and our brand and our name. But yeah, I definitely, I don't mind paying premium price and then charging a premium price for a premium product. And I think that there's categories within that with ready to drink as well. There's some that you can that are everywhere, and then there's some really crafted products as well. I know we've taken up more of time.
Fantastic. Appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.